Bonjour everyone, I am Anne-Lise Cailliez and welcome to Parlez-vous CEO, where we ditch the corporate talk and get real about entrepreneurship. Each week, I chat with founders and CEOs who build businesses their way, through the failures, pivots, and breakthroughs. And they bring the fire. Plus, I'll drop some golden nuggets of wisdom from my own entrepreneurial journey. This is your space to grow, learn, and evolve with a true growth mindset. Remember, success isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. Now let's kick things off and get this party started. Hello, bonjour, bonjour, hello. Welcome to another episode of Parlez-vous CEO. My name is Anne-Lise Cailliez and I am your host. For those who are just joining the podcast, we're Brandora and we specialize in helping real estate companies scale their revenue. And if you want to learn how to take your business to the next level, just make sure to stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop the word growth in the DMs. We read every DM. Today, I have a very exciting guest and I'm pumped to have with me Lisa Wise. Lisa, hi. It's such a pleasure to have you today. I'm really excited to share your story and your background with our listeners. Lisa is a serial entrepreneur with a justice lens, an author, built so many businesses. Lisa, in your own words, would you share with our listeners a little bit about your story, how you came about to real estate and really some of your achievements?
Absolutely. Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me. I enjoyed our pre-conversation, which sometimes those can not be as fun. So especially the folks who want to start with, tell me where you're from. And I thought, well, if you could have found one thing out about me ahead of time, it would be nice if you could have one out. But yeah, happy to start with kind of what my background and specifically how I found my way to working in housing and real estate and doing all of that with a justice lens. I lived in 23 different places before I went to college and wasn't quite sure at that time that I had been experiencing quite a bit of housing insecurity. I did, however, know that I wanted to have a home that I called my own. And that ownership somehow really framed my idea of what a future could look like for me if I was successful. And a lot of different things happened to me over the years, moving from one small Western mountain town to another. I also recognized that I was not only living with housing insecurity and bouncing around, but I was also not really fitting in. So I'd look around and think, one of these things does not look like the other, and it's me. I am not really lined up with what's typical in these very vanilla, very homogeneous environments that I was in. So, I knew that there was something different about me, just generally speaking. And part of that had to do with class. I didn't realize that at the time, but I was a lesbian. I was living with different parents at different times, different relatives at different times. There was so much complexity and not a lot of alignment with what was going on around me and the different communities that I was part of. And I saw my parents struggle and the family members I lived with struggle financially, and housing being one of those things that was certainly like that instability for all of us made it a really strong impression on me as someone growing up who didn't want to find themselves and myself in the same situation. And I was also lucky enough to be born, with a briefcase in my hands and was naturally entrepreneurial. And as a kid, I had every kind of business you can imagine, from dog sitting to snow shoveling to selling rocks door to door to I started the Sherlock Holmes Detective Agency, which was my most creative business and the least successful. No clients, there were no mysteries to solve, but I did get the woman who worked at the paper that came out every 2 weeks, because they lived in a postage stamp town at that time. She put a free ad in the paper for me. And I thought, oh, business is going to come rolling in. And I had set up a little office in the shed in the backyard, and I was just ready for it. I wanted to kind of have my office. I was really imagined taking meetings. So I was a kid who not only wanted secure homes and housing when I grew up, but I also really dreamed about my home office. So I was not that kid dreaming of weddings. I was like,
I love
what
this
would my
so
home
much.
office look like?
I love it. So cute with your detective shed, waiting for your clients.
Waiting for my clients never materialized. But I was always just kind of a hustler as a kid. I was gritty and saving money and starting all these little side businesses that over time, those qualities served me well. So, by the time I got to college, which was sort of a miracle. My educational trajectory was not great. When you move that many times, you move schools a lot. So I went to 4 different high schools. I just didn't have a lot of continuity to depend on. And I also had never learned how to take a test. So I couldn't take, I just was left behind. I was one of those kids that was being left behind. But I found my way to the University of Arizona, and I loved it there. It was an ideal school for me. I would go to the job board every day, and that's when they would put, they'd put the little notebook or the card to the poster board or the cork board in the jobs office at this university. And I just get one job after another. I'd take every one of the cards and I'd start calling people up. And I had a job at a radio station overnight as a DJ, and I would take another shift if I could, if they'd offer it to me. It was midnight to 6:30. I got so much done. And I just kind of announced the time and the weather and played the music, and I don't know. So I worked at domestic violence shelters, did a lot of political work. I was really invested and interested in justice and making things right for other people. And that value system was very pronounced in me. It wasn't I need to protect myself. It was, if I can protect myself, then I can also protect other people, was always my orientation. So I moved through college and explored lots of different things and started my first little businesses then. I had a video visions cleaning company. I had video production companies. I got a film degree. I was doing wedding videos. I was doing quinceañeras. That probably paid like a nickel an hour by the time we were done trying to figure out how to do the work on those. But always, again, really trying to figure out how to be as entrepreneurial and successful as possible. I put myself through school and really enjoyed being in that environment. I got into I somehow found my way into the Honor Society. I got a scholarship, and I was like, I'm really going to find my path here. And it was great. And Arizona was really good to me. And while I was there, I had an aunt call me and say, you have a cousin Richard that lives in Tucson. And I said, who is cousin Richard? I've never heard of cousin Richard. She said, well, he's my first cousin. So he's your first cousin once removed, my dad's cousin. And she said, he lives in town. You should call him and look him up. And I thought, oh, cool. This is the 90s. I thought his wife will make a nice dinner for me. And, they probably live in the foothills, and I live downtown. And so I called Richard, and he said, great, meet me on the corner of Meyer and Fifth Street downtown in the barrio. And I said, okay. And I pulled up in my crappy, old clunky Honda, and he was standing on the corner, and he had really tight jeans on and a black leather jacket and this just mischievous smile. And I was like, oh, there will be no wife. This is why I haven't heard about Richard, because he was the relative I had been like looking for my whole life. And he taught me everything I needed to know about living in the desert and queer culture and being gay and being yourself and being in an environment where, it's finally one of those things was like the other. And it was Richard for me. Mm-hmm. Richard and I were fast friends, an instant bonding connection. We became very, very close. And there's a lot that changed in my life at that time. And in particular, Richard came to my house one day, and he had lesions all over his face. And I knew at that time, I hadn't seen him in a month or so. He traveled a lot. He was an architect. And I thought, oh my God, he's got full-blown AIDS. And he had not shared with me at that time what his HIV status was. He was very private about that because you had to be. And Richard, he became very ill, and he needed a lot of help and support. And I was able to care for him for several years while he was sick with AIDS until he died. And those were like two of the best years of my life, having that time with him. It was the longest, richest conversation of my lifetime. And I'm just so grateful for that time that we had together. I miss him, but I loved that I got that from him. And he had different wishes for me. One of which was to have me rent his garden apartment, which I loved. Like, he had this really great Adobe garden apartment with koi pond. And it was just great. And I felt very at home there and very loved unconditionally. And that was a big deal for me. And he said, I want you to take this apartment. And I said, okay. And he said, and I want you to take my car. And I said, okay. And he died like that day, pretty much. And I handled his affairs, but the first thing I did was sell the car. And then I called my landlord, and I was living in an Adobe duplex in Tucson. He was like a unit on one side and then a unit on the other side. And I lived on one side. And I called my landlord and I said, hey, you live in Australia and I'm renting this place from you long distance, which is cool, but do you want to sell this house? And he said, yeah, I think it's probably a good idea to sell it. And I sold the car for $8,300. And he said, well, how much do you think you'd want to pay? And I said, how about $83,000? And he said, okay. And I had that 10% down payment and I bought the whole shebang. So it was the best decision I made against someone's wishes. But that house completely transformed my life because I not only had a home of my own, but I had someone who was able to help pay that mortgage, who was the resident that lived on the other side, who became a good friend. And it was at that time where I was able to fully realize what it meant to be in control of and have agency in my own home and feel the security of knowing that I had a place to be and the confidence in myself that the commitment was manageable. And I felt like I was making a decision that aligned with what I needed most, but also tied in terms of that security, but also very much tied to me being able to share the abundance. And, the math was so beautiful. My mortgage was $550 and the resident, he lived on one side, paid $350. And then I had a roommate who paid $125. I mean, and that was the math. I was like, this is amazing. And then I would go buy used building material. I mean, I made $19,000 a year when I bought the property and I was just out of college. I had to do all the work on it myself. So I learned how to tile and paint and patch and fix the roof and install toilets and tubs and take out load-bearing walls. And I loved working with my hands. So that little Adobe mud duplex was the beginning for me of managing rentals. And so I started doing that for myself, and then I would do it for other people. And then I would buy another property because I would use one to buy another. And over time, I had sort of put together this small little property management side business. But I went ahead and I became very engaged in and professionally committed to healthcare and justice and education and the environment. And I had a 15-year career in the nonprofit world and loved that as well. And then one day realized, I don't think I actually make a big difference doing this work. If I had a business, I think I could do more. And decided, you know what? I think I want to make a play at doing this property management work full time, or just give it more energy and make it a real thing. And that's when I started Nest in 2008. And now I'm the founder owner of Nest DC, which is a property management company that manages property in DC and parts of Maryland. And our core value and mission is to care the most and to manage homes with care. So we have over the years managed thousands of properties, and I've had different businesses that have intersected with Nest at different times doing different kinds of management and explored some big plays as a professional. And over the last 2 years, realized I went big and I wanted to go home. So I went back to Nest, which was my sort of legacy business, my pride, and really the heart of where I started and where I decided I wanted to land again. So I have been really working on rebuilding and reinventing my legacy brand, which is Nest, since in the last 18 months. So that's where I am now.
Wow, thank you so much. No, that was perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. There's so many things I want to go back to. First, my impression is you are fearless. I mean, even as a kid, you were starting 52 businesses and you constantly believed in what you were doing. I mean, you were not second guessing. You had a mini detective office. You put an ad as a kid. You just you keep on just evolving, bounding, making the most of each situation one after the other, when people could have been like, oh no, I kind of want to give up. Every time, you keep moving forward and in such creative ways and beautiful way and very conscientious. It's really admirable and inspiring to watch your journey. Thank you so much for sharing. So I love also how you were so young and already starting walking the walk in real estate and doing everything yourself, because again, somebody else in this situation could be like, oh, too hard to maintain a property, too hard to do. But you're just like, no, I'm going to figure it out. I want to understand what makes you know or believe that you can do it, that you're going to figure it out? How did you ever have that confidence and self-belief that I can make it happen, and yes, I'm going to have clients, like that's the mindset, such a strong mindset. Where does it come from, do you think?
Being uninformed and naive, actually.
So ignorance is
It's not paying enough attention to what it is that I'm deciding I can do. I really I'm the person that's, I don't like directions. I want to just get started. And I think that is metaphor for if I read the directions around how to do what I did, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. just taking that leap. It was that blind faith. It's my refrain is, oh, that'll be easy always. And it's never easy. I know it's not
It's
easy,
great.
but somehow my frame of reference is that'll be easy. I can conceive and see things pretty quickly, but I leave out all the little steps, and I'm looking at the broad strokes and thinking like, how hard could that be? And it's always hard, but when I've decided I want to do something, then I just keep working until it's happening. And if it can't happen, I make adjustments, right? Certainly we've all done things where I'm like, that's not working out. We need to stop and move over and start something else. But I have a lot of discipline. And I will work really hard. And I also know that my business and my work impacts other people's lives, and that impact is important. And so I'm not in it because like I want more things or I'm fancier a lot. It's like I have 50 people that are relying on me for their jobs. I have then if there's something to solve here, I need to be able to do that. And I have to do it well. So I may not know how hard it's going to be. I may not be prepared for that, but I can't worry about that when I know I'm just going to have to find my way through it. And nothing's really been more true. That's never been more true than I think it is now, as we all try and recalibrate ourselves during another increasingly complex and uncertain time. How do you, as a business, have both agility and circle the wagons? And, you just have to keep saying, like, I will not accept failure. I will not. I cannot, because if I fail, these people are affected in ways that does not feel right to me. So that becomes part of the mission.
I love that. It's so inspiring. It really sounds like you have such a strong trifecta with your belief, the discipline, and having found your purpose and, understanding the impact that you have. It's beautiful to hear. And I'm sure that will resonate with our listeners, because I think it's not always easy to figure out that combo, right? And it sounds like you figured out pretty quickly for yourself earlier on in your life.
Yeah. I have never wanted anything unless that thing can help more people. Understood uh, the value in my ability to get other people to do things. And I feel a responsibility to those people. So it is a matter of knowing that if I can get people to follow and buy into this thing that I'm doing, then I'll get more people willing to do that thing. If the thing is good and there's benevolence and there's good intention and there's justice involved, then I need to do that work. That's my purpose, is to say, I can get people to follow along and I'm going in the right direction. I know I'm going in the right direction. And that gives me, I think, enough wind to get through the stuff that seems almost impossibly hard, is to know that I do have a purpose here, that people need me to be doing what I'm doing. I was thinking about I did tons and tons of campaign work for Kamala. And, I come from a political background as well, as does my wife. We basically turned the house into campaign headquarters, but the first start was, we're writing postcards. And I'm like, God, I've got the claw. I mean, and then I'm thinking, like, how many people could I get to write postcards? I was like, I think I could get more people to write postcards in the time that I'm writing the postcards. So I just started basically a pyramid scheme. And I had all of these activist kits produced, and I had landing pages on the website, and I had businesses that were giving the kits out, and we got 10,000 postcards out. And like,
nice.
Because I need to be able to do that because I can, kind of thing. And it took a long time to learn how to do that. But that's where I think it's the impact. When you can contribute, you need to contribute.
And so to go back to what you were saying, you can manage to have people on board. What do you think makes you successful to create movement and to have people join you in your movement and influence them?
Because I just walk the talk. Because you'll see me walk down the street and pick garbage up if there's garbage. Because
if there's garbage,
you just pick the garbage up. I think that's it. It's that simple. I will spin down and pick up the garbage. I'm not asking other people to do something I won't do myself. And I believe that we all have a strong contribution to make, and I'll be contributing all day long. So come along. I'm not having somebody do that instead of me. But in addition to, I so deeply believe in what it means to share abundance, and that life is better when you give, and it feels better to give than to receive, just as a state of being. And my behavior all day at work and all day in my life just honestly just reflects that from my volunteer time, which some days I think, guys, like I'm just the one Lisa, but I know that what I'm doing and on these different boards or by promoting different organizations or hosting an event to fundraise for these, like all of this is, I have to do it. And I think people see me doing that and they're like, oh, that I can get behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And that looks like a good direction to be going in. It's a very active direction. Part of this is because it's like if I sat down for too long, it wouldn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Momentum kind of helps you get through hard things.
So you really lead by example. And would you like to share with our audience a bit more of the work that you do with your nonprofit, with Birdseed?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So when George Floyd was murdered, like many others, I went on a really deep learning journey about not what it meant to be anti-racist, but going much deeper into the complexity of how we've created structural racism, and even more specifically in real estate. And I've always been very progressive, very active politically, and I had not taken the time to study and really look comprehensively at how the real estate industry in particular had created the racial wealth gap, and that racial wealth gap has contributed to an inequity that has deeply affected people's ability to be mobile, to achieve equality, and to have futures and lives that everyone should be entitled to. And I, from not just redlining, but predatory lending, like just all of it. My dog's honking her. She's honking the toy now. But the origin story of that really is real estate, designing communities so that you couldn't even be in a community after 5. The learning journey I went on, and I did that with others, was really just reminded me that I cannot be successful in an industry that is responsible for this, or I'm complicit in this. And I went for a walk one night in the middle of the pandemic. I'm going to get her, and then you can edit the part out. I'm going to get the toy.
Oh, that's good. That allows me to laugh a little because I was holding back.
I know. I was like, I know she's.
Because we're talking about a serious subject, and I keep on hearing wink. I'm like,
it could be an outtake. So anyway, the real estate industry has been the most active, persistent, and consistent in creating a racial wealth gap that persists. And I have seen almost zero evidence of anyone in the real estate industry saying, oh, what could I do about that? It's not discussed. It's not acknowledged. It's rarely, we talk about fair housing when you're looking at either sales or the rental environment. And there is certainly like some check marks, but there is no movement. There's no commitment to saying, how does the real estate industry actually undo what we did? And I was really struggling with how our company, which had always been philanthropic, always been very invested in community engagement. We didn't do marketing. We just volunteered for organizations. That was 100% how we did our marketing. And it worked really well for us. So we, hold on a second. Would you mind taking her? Because she's honking things. My podcast. Sorry again.
it's okay.
Okay. All right. Back to Birdseed. So, I had been working with folks in my leadership team talking about what can we do around housing justice in particular. That had been an interest of ours, more intentionality. I'd been doing a lot of writing and speaking and roundtables around racism in the workplace and anti-racism, and been talking a lot about racism in real estate, but wanted to do something more active. And I was, height of the pandemic, really dark days. I was on a walk with the dogs, and I was on this really long, dark stretch of road. And I started thinking about, we could contribute to people, just redistribute. I was like, there has to be a way to redistribute. And I was thinking about Richard, and I was thinking about that $8,300. And I was thinking about what I had at that time versus what other people had. And I'd been working on our succession plan, because when you own a business, you have to think about that. And we were trying to nail down what needs to happen with this business. And there were open questions about which organizations might you want to support? And nothing felt right. Even though I've worked in every kind of organization you can imagine or volunteered with one, nothing clicked. And, my wife and I met at Planned Parenthood, but even still, it was just nothing feels right. What do I really want to do right now? And I just said, I just want to give people money to buy houses and just give it to them. I don't want to ask for anything in return. I don't want to have people even really have to fill out much of an application. I'd like to just give the money away. And that had always been a value of mine. Why does money and support have to come with strings? And we had a giving program for the organization, which we still have for the company, which is a micro grant where we give a doer, maker, or disruptor $100 grant to do something and to sort of do something in 90 days, an idea. We had people that made special hot sauces and we helped a veteran farmer buy a tractor. We helped a woman who threw birthday parties for homeless kids, murals, bicycle repair stations, all these really cool projects. But the fun part about that program is that we had a 300-word application and you couldn't go over. That was it. If I had to read your application, then I didn't have time to read applications. So why would I bother having people write one? Plus, I want them to do the project, make the hot sauce. I don't want you writing a grant. I don't care if you're a 501c3 or not. It doesn't make a difference. I want you to have the tractor or throw the parties or help, Black girls who code. And there was I just have always loved that. And I thought, well, what if we just give down payment grants the same way, and we'll just have people fill out like a 300-word application, and then we can just give them $10,000. And it was just, the number was 10,000. And so by the end of that walk, at the end of that road, I said, I just want to give people money to buy houses. That's what we'll do. We'll just use the same model. We'll call it Birdseed, and that's what we'll do. And so I text Grace, my number 2, my partner at Nest, and I said, hey, I think that I've got the housing justice work that we want to do. And I described, I want to give this $10,000 no strings. And she's like, oh, that sounds great. Like, what are you thinking? Like 20, 2 or 3 months, or, and I said, well, I want to start this tomorrow. It's not going to be that hard. It's going to be so easy. We already have the forms online. We'll just ask a few different questions. I have friends that do things like this, I'm sure. I mean, this is going to be a breeze. And she said, okay, cool. And I said, don't worry, I will work on this. I will take the lead on this. And if there's something here, then it'll be something here. And if there's not, then I'm the one that will make sure that we make traction there. And I personally committed 200 in pool. And the goal was to really just move that money into people's accounts and get them, equity in homes. And as it turned out, I met a series of people who got very invested and excited about this work. And Birdseed is now a full-fledged foundation. And we've had 36 people buy homes with our support. The program is precisely as advertised. It's a no strings attached down payment grant. The application is no more than 60 minutes. You don't have to stand up while you're answering the questions. The idea is that we just trust you to tell us the answers, and we score people. We do interviews. We have an incredibly sort of sophisticated and elegant system for tracking all these things. I have a volunteer executive director. We have 50 advisory board members, and we've been able to get support from people from all over the world, frankly, who think, I give a donation and that goes to someone who gets dollars, and it's very direct. And it's all we do. We don't do programming. We don't do classes. We don't have requirements. We do no strings attached down payment grants. When people close, if they'd like to send us a picture, that'd be great. But they have zero obligation to us. There's no reporting. It's not forgiven over time. It's released at closing, and that's it. So it is a beautiful thing, and it works. We are, of course, concerned about whether or not this administration is going to create complication here. We have traditionally, BIPOC and Black and Brown home buyers are those who have qualified for and received those grants. We've changed that language to reflect the new reality of that kind of programming being under scrutiny. So now it is the questions are not the funds are not earmarked for Black and Brown home buyers, but the questions are open to anyone to answer. And I'm ecstatic with what we've been able to do. And truly, the more resources we have, we know we have people who are going to help us get to the point where we can distribute as much as we can. And the goal is to not have any money in the accounts. So we don't have endowments. We don't want cash in the account. If we have cash in the accounts, it's not in someone's house building equity. That to me, if I could direct all my energy toward that, and use all of that passion and discipline and momentum that I have and put that energy there, it's where I would choose to invest my time, because I do know, and it's certainly where I do invest a lot of my time. But again, I've been really lucky to have other people support the work and help us get bigger and better at doing it.
Fantastic project. I mean, that completely lights me up, and I'm sure our listeners will be very excited as well. So people, for you who are listening, the name of the company is Birdseed, and it's so inspiring. I love that you're doing that. It's also so refreshing, because real estate, right? I love that you're doing that and how committed and passionate you are. And it's very unique. Like, your angle is very unique. How you're approaching it is so unique and So pure.
It is. That means I favor simplicity, and yeah, it's why we had all these core values, and I said, how about if we just care the most, and that'll be all we need to do. It's like, and that kind of says it all.
Yeah,
And sometimes, just the one $10,000 grant can change everything. The same way that
absolutely.
$8,300 changed the entire trajectory of my life. And certainly, I would have found some other way of getting ahead in the world. But there was something very much about that $8,300 that I had to do with as I pleased, which was buy a home of my own, and to be able to extend and pay that back to others who didn't have a relative with a $8,300 anything. And it really is about that transfer of wealth. And it doesn't even need to be much to make a complete life change for someone. And that's what I'm aiming to do, is say, I might have had a lot I struggled with and went through as a kid, but I'm still a white lady who got an education. And the privilege that comes with that, everyone should have that privilege. And we've designed that out of the narrative and the story for people that don't look like you. And in many cases, anybody that is not fitting into this homogeneous sort of environment that's designed for white folks is behind. And I don't like that. So I'm trying to even the playing field.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And now I'd like to touch on your book, Self-Elected. Could you tell us and our audience a bit more about it?
Yes, I wrote this book. I really wanted to write a book about my journey. I like storytelling. I think that's probably obvious by now. And I wanted to share that you can do business and good. And in fact, they should go hand in hand. And for me, wanting to sort of share the story of my journey, that I didn't have a business background. I could invest my time. I did not need to go out and raise a bunch of money. I could just work with my hands, spend the extra hours, and put something together that created a security for myself and others was a story I thought worth sharing. And then how to design something that isn't just about you, but is about making the world better. And so I wrote my book, which was called Self-Elected: How to Put Justice Over Profit and Soar in Business. And this is me on my grandmother's horse, whose name was Mortgage. So for me to go into real estate, that seemed to be the perfect picture. And the book it does three things. It really tells my story, and it offers a sort of guidelines on a framework for how I built a company that I think has been successful. And every company changes over time, right? Just as we mature as individuals, businesses mature and change and have different needs and seasons. But I think overall, built a company based on kind of a lean startup model that I didn't know anything about until I read it after I started the business. But sort of what is intuitive about keeping things simple, caring for the people in the business, being a servant leader, and being willing to stop doing things that aren't working as quickly as possible, and then tying that to what is the payoff when business is paying it forward, and what is the sort of the socioeconomic, the political economy around being a business that's more invested in social good than cash. And does that generate momentum for even more success if you're willing to redefine success? And that's what I was able to do in the book. And it's a miracle I learned to read, write a book. I really did get a craptastic education growing up until I got to college and was really able to carve out and map how I was going to educate myself. And I knew that I needed to learn to write was the first thing that I did when I got to college, and still had not, really felt that I had the skills to write a book. And I found writing the book one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I enjoyed it very much. It was a time with myself that I think was a gift. I'm always really appreciative to the team that kept things really moving and moving along well while I was able to write the book. So it's audio, and you can buy the actual copy, or you can just text me. I'll send you a copy.
Self-Elected is the name of the book. And was that another project where when you started, you're like, it should be easy?
Definitely, yeah. I thought that'd be easy. I say in the foreword that I hired a ghostwriter, and I think she wrote like 3 paragraphs before I thought, I don't know that that's going to work out so great. I think her voice is like, she doesn't have and I had to just accept that I needed to do it, that there wasn't a shortcut. And I have to continue to remind myself, you have to go through it. There's no skipping over. You have to tell the story yourself. I have a particular pride in this book having been written, every word of it, by me and not AI. I wrote it before AI existed, at least in a consumer context. And so these were my words, and it was like such a joy. I had an editor that I worked with, and it was great. And she did a beautiful job of making sure that all my crappy grammar was cleaned up and all the things that I didn't know about how sentences are structured and things like that. And yeah, it was a really wonderful journey. And I would like to write another book, which don't tell my spouse that I said that out loud or anybody else. But I think if you've done it once, I do think that it's easier to do it again. The hardest part of writing a book is getting people to read it, though. And so you have to be willing to have the personal satisfaction of having created something that if even one person reads it and their life changes a bit, then it's worth it. And I've definitely I met with somebody who asked to meet with me, and I think she was surprised when I said yes. She was awesome. I love meeting with all people, but I met her in a coffee shop, and she was like reading my book, and felt great. I was like, oh my God, you have my book. And it's funny, as a business owner, I believe that my ability to be relational has been my number one skill and asset as a business person, is to be able to connect with actual people. And it's amazing when you meet another person that does that, as a contrast to people that don't. So I go to meet with her, and I'd been all over her LinkedIn. I knew exactly what she'd been doing, at least from that perspective. And she met with me and read my book. The potential for me to want to work with her is 10x at that point. And she has a business that I could easily hire for things. And I think this is exactly what I want to hire, someone that's invested some time in building a relationship with me versus looking at me as someone she can do business with. And I see that contrast all the time. The person who will someone sat down with me and asked if I'd sort of walk him through an academic project that he was working on. And I got on the phone with him, and he said, okay, so I just have some personal questions. Like, how long have you been doing management? And, well, where are you from? And I said, I know all about myself, and you too can learn about me on the internet. So just spend an hour doing that, and then we can have a much better conversation. But he missed a whole window of opportunity to create connection. And the time you take to create connection will serve you well in every part of life. And the curiosity and learning and knowing something about another person enriches whatever you can do together. And we spoke about that at the beginning of the call, which is, bringing people together that have things in common make all people stronger together.
Absolutely.
And some people miss that because they're working on transactions.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, one of my biggest joy in life is connection. I think that's really the whole point of why we're here. I love this. And so, Lisa, if you were to meet yourself and meet 20-year-old Lisa, what do you think the conversation would look like? What do you think you would share as a piece of wisdom with her?
Bill, more quickly.
More quickly than you?
No, just like do your invoicing faster. It's a simple thing. Like, there's certain things that I just practically didn't want to be bothered with or learn or that didn't give me energy. I needed to actually slow down more and learn some things. I've always been proud of the fact that I don't have a business degree, but wished I had. So I think there are two sides to that. I would tell myself, don't skip all the steps. Remember to pay attention to the steps to protect yourself. And that's one piece that's practical. And the other piece I struggle with because I'm too generous. And everybody says that, even the people that I'm too generous with. And it has very much worked against me. And I also believe it's my very best quality. And I think I would invite myself to just reflect more deeply on what I wanted to achieve with my generosity and then manage it differently. Because I've been generous with people and with things and in settings where it didn't have impact. And I don't want something for my generosity, but I do want it to have impact and to not be just surely taken advantage of. And I think the intention behind my generosity, the thinking, the value system around it, if I could go back, I would spend a lot more time thinking about how I wanted to contribute and how I did that in a way that was really just consistent with my values.
I love that. That's such a great piece of advice. This is something that I struggle with as well. So this is really what I call the golden nuggets of wisdom. It's, your generosity can be, your best and your worst, but it's how to manage it, how to be selective, and how to make sure you're using it for impact and aligning with your values. I love that. This is very useful. Love it. So Lisa, what's coming up next for you?
I have a big fundraiser on the 20th of May. And that's coming up for me. And I bring that up in part because how does one announce a fundraiser right now? How do you build a fundraiser in an environment where everyone is disrupted in terms of whether you're a nonprofit, a business, an individual? You are being disrupted right now. So there's no business as usual. There's no life as usual. There's no community as usual in Washington, D.C., which I'm very, very engaged locally, politically, and in my community has always been my number one focus as a business person, is support the community you're asking to support you. If I want my business to be successful, then I want my city and my community to be successful. I should start doing that before I start asking the community to invest in me. And that was always the model. Again, that's kind of how our marketing worked. I'm like, if I want the city to care, then I'm going to pick up the garbage. And we do trash walks a lot. I love picking up garbage. It can be dicey in certain neighborhoods. That the way that we have gathered, the why we have gathered around how we've gathered as organizations, communities, networks, clubs, all of it, the moment is different. And so I had been pumping the brakes on, like, I don't know when we want to organize this fundraiser. Who wants to have their name on something that is really what this administration is against? It's just a super tender time. So what I'm doing now is reimagining how we put something together that isn't a fundraising event, but a convening for action, and bringing people together to support Birdseed, and then actually using that event to introduce people to ways in which they can become active during this time, and have and do what I think is going to be a gallery walk where we have different organizations working on things like healthcare, education, housing, food, insecurity, and find ways for people to, like, give them something where they can actually make a time investment or an exposure investment or a networking investment or a cash investment to these different entities that are trying to meet these increasingly vast crevasses of need and community, and people needing right now to find ways to be connected, and be impactful, and it feels very hard to figure that out. We're in a city that is so deeply affected right now and is struggling and suffering, full stop. So, which is why having a cheerful fundraiser in a great space does not seem to match the mood, but bringing people together to say, what are we going to commit to here? This has to be a team sport. What do you feel you can do safely and securely to change the trajectory of this, of sort of where we are right now as a country and as a community? And so that's my next big thing, is trying to try and continue to re-navigate, rebuild my company, circle the wagons and be agile, while also saying, okay, now I got to focus on building momentum for fundraising for an organization when fundraising is very, like, not a particularly effective activity right now. And can you check more about how do you take a negative, turn it into a positive? And by creating an active-based event, an action-based event, versus a cocktail party where people, stare at each other with massive concern while also trying to just enjoy the moment. Let's just admit to everybody, like, this time is truly the worst, and how do we work on it together? So that's my next big thing. 3 weeks away.
Wow. 3 weeks away. Thank you so much for sharing. And so where can people find more information about this fundraising and about you in general?
Yes, you can visit the birdseed.org, or you can go to nest-dc.com, and we'll have access to information about those things there. You can follow our channels as well. So we're busy on Meta, we're busy on LinkedIn, and you can always kind of track and see what we're doing there. Again, we give a lot of visibility to our business peers, our nonprofit peers. So we have a newsletter that goes out every week to about 11,000 people. One of the things I was able to do as a property manager is build a fan club, which no property manager ever can do. But it's because one of the reasons why we can pull that off is because we never talk about property management because it's super boring. But we can talk about the hot roof decks in the area, or where to take a 3-day weekend, or how you're going to give back to community, or where to vote, or how to get active. And that kind of content and identity that we've created as a company has encouraged people to want to follow along. And so you can always hop into any one of our newsletters or social media to see how we're trying to meet the moment in the world.
Of course, you among anyone would create a fan club around the property management,
No, it's funny.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for being with us today. It was such a pleasure, and it was so inspiring and so refreshing. Such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thank you for being here on the podcast today and sharing your story. And that wraps up today's episode. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I can't wait to join you again next week.
Thanks for listening to Parlez-vous CEO today. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep going. And connect with us on Instagram at Parlez-vous CEO. I am Anne-Lise Cailliez, and I know some days are harder than others. On those tough days, think back to why you started. What you're doing today matters, even when you can't see the results yet. Ideas are great, but it's what you do with them that counts. Find everything we talked about today at parlezvousceo.com. See you next week, and you've got this.